Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Washington Capitals, in which the Sharks lost 5-1. And this was a pretty uninspired game of hockey played by the San Jose Sharks. It was pretty clear from about 10 minutes into the first period that the Capitals were the team that wanted the 2 points more. The Sharks coming off of a 6-game winning, they were on a 6-game winning streak, coming off of a four-game road trip out of Western Canada, so maybe a bit tired, even though they did have a couple of days off. The Capitals, their previous game was against the Blue Jackets, one of their worst of the season. I believe through 2 periods they only had a total of 7 shots in that game. They put up 7 shots within the first half of the first period in this one, and so it just seemed as though the Sharks were playing somewhat lazily. The Capitals were flying all over the ice, and they ended up being the team to take the win, and pretty deservingly so. Now, surprisingly enough, the Sharks were the team who actually striked first in this game. It was Kevin Labanc, his 11th of the season, as he stayed with playing some good hockey, I guess I could say. It was 1-0, but then the Capitals got a power play scored within the first few seconds of that. That was TJ Oshie's first, his 17th, and then it sort of just went on from there. The Capitals added with Vrana's goal in the first. 2-1 by the end of the first period. It still seemed in reach, but it was clear that the Sharks really didn't have it tonight. In the third period, in the second period, Ovechkin made it 3-1. Oshie made it 4-1 later on, and then in the third period, not much was going on. Tom Wilson added with an empty net goal to make it 5-1 Washington, and so this was somewhat a different game to what the Sharks played against the Capitals earlier on. It was still the Sharks having some issues defensively, especially the latter half of the first period. They were just giving every single puck away as possible. Anytime they had it in their own zone, it seemed as though they were passing it into the skates of a Capitals player or even onto the tape of a Capitals player, and so it was somewhat sloppy there. But, in the last 20-30 minutes of this game, it wasn't as much sloppy as it was just sort of lazy and uninspired, as I said. First player to talk about is Martin Jones. Didn't have the greatest outing tonight, but there wasn't much to be said about the goals he did let in. The Oshie's second one was on a breakaway. Vrana's was on a bad bounce. Ovechkin's a cross-ice pass one-timer, and it's Ovechkin. The only one that I had a bit of an issue with was Oshie's first, because this was a shot that came on net. He makes the save, but it sort of squeaks through. This allows Oshie to bank it in off of Marc-Edouard Vlasic in front. Now, normally I'd probably be more upset with Martin Jones, but this was a shot from Ovechkin, one of the greatest goal scorers of all time, and so it's a bit difficult to control his shot, but still, you would have liked to see him make that save. So not a great night for Martin Jones. The Sharks will also lose their streak, not just their winning streak, but their streak of letting in 2 or less goals to the opposing team. Next to talk about is Erik Karlsson. I had said that, he probably wouldn't end up joining them on the road trip, but, it would only be really start to worry if he didn't end up skating before this home game against the Capitals. He did skate, but he did not play. The Sharks are being extremely careful when it comes to Erik Karlsson returning. I guess they really don't want this injury to be re-aggravated or something. And I guess with a 6-game winning streak, there was not much of a reason to bring in him, but we did see why Erik Karlsson is still a huge part of the Sharks offense. It seems as though, I don't have the exact stats of how much ice time Burns had, because it seems as though this game was played on a completely different planet. NHL.com did not seem to follow the fact that this game was actually occurring tonight and all the outlets connected to that. So I don't know how much Burns actually played, but it seemed as though he was on the ice basically every other shift. And so it was a bit of an issue sort of working Burns a lot into the play with Erik Karlsson. The fact that he's not in, he's really the second guy who you could have. It's the 1-2 punch that you have Burns on, and then you can take him off for Erik Karlsson. But there isn't much offense coming from the back end past Brent Burns, because the next person you're looking to is basically Tim Heed, who really isn't as gifted or anywhere near as gifted offensively as Erik Karlsson. So the Sharks do still miss him, and so anyone who is saying, Erik Karlsson, the Sharks seem fine without him, it's pretty clear that they would much rather have him here than not. Next is the third line. That's the third line for the Sharks that I'm talking about. Sorensen, Thornton, and Labanc. Most of the players on the team were pretty not great tonight. I thought Meier and Couture both looked not at their best. Kane, Hurdle, and Donskoy, as rare as it has been, weren't that great here tonight. I thought Sorensen, Thornton, and Labanc, while they weren't super impressive, they weren't dominant, they did have a few good shifts for themselves. Of course, Labanc scored, Thornton assisting on that, as he, I think, passes Teemu Selanne now for 50 15th place all time in terms of points. And so I thought Thornton in particular actually had a pretty good night for himself, some good shifts for him. It wasn't a great night for anybody, as I'll say again, but still Thornton had some decent plays in the offensive zone, so it wasn't all bad. And I guess I could say the third line was the best out of the three other lines tonight for the Sharks. Maybe the fourth line actually had a decent game. By the way, Radil in the lineup over Gambrell while Gambrell was actually available to play. We'll see if that will be something that changes going into the game on Saturday, if DeBoer just wants to make a change at this point because of how this game went tonight. Finally, I'll talk about Justin Braun. I thought Braun had a pretty good game. Again, I can't really reference any sort of stats here because of the fact that I don't know any of the stats, because NHL.com seems to think that this game doesn't exist. But I think from just the eye test in general, I thought Braun actually had a pretty good night defensively. And just to mention, because I feel like Braun has, again, flown under the radar somewhat. He's been just such a solid defenseman here, especially since the All-Star break, I should say. And Braun is, in a lot of people's minds, one of the more expendable members of the San Jose Sharks on the defensive side because, Burns and Karlsson are, of course, Burns and Karlsson. Vlasic, is still Vlasic, and he also has a very large contract. But when it comes to Justin Braun, his contract isn't that big. He's up, and I think after this year, well, he has the rest of this season, and I think one more after that. And, he's at the age 30 or 31 at this point. And so a lot of people don't really view Braun as some sort of great member of the Sharks defense. He's sort of just the other guy there in the top four. But I really still like Justin Braun's play. I still think he's a very key defenseman to the defensive side of the game. Everyone talks about Marc-Edouard Vlasic, but Justin Braun has, again, flown under the radar, flown under, Vlasic's great defensive play in these past few years, as still being a very good defenseman. I still think on any other team besides the Sharks, who are running with like 3 elite caliber defensemen, Justin Braun could easily be a number 2, behind someone who's more offensively gifted. Put him on like the Calgary Flames, and he could be right behind Mark Giordano, or put him on one of these teams, or put him on Washington. He could be potentially right behind John Carlson, but Niskanen and Orlov are pretty good in general. But still, I liked Braun's game tonight. I've liked Braun's game for a lot of this season. Even when the Sharks were struggling defensively, I thought Justin Braun wasn't great, but was still pretty good, which is more to say than some of the other defensemen on the Sharks, like Vlasic. And so, just in general, to give some appreciation for number 61, because he seems to be sometimes go a bit underappreciated by, Sharks fans and Sharks-related people and article writers and whatever alike. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday. They'll face off against the Vancouver Canucks again, of course. They just played the Canucks on Monday. That was a 7-2 victory for the San Jose Sharks. And the previous meeting before that was a 4-0 victory for the Sharks, so they have currently outscored the Canucks 11-2 this season, so the Canucks will be looking for some revenge there. The Sharks will be looking to claim those 2 points and get back into the win column, as the last time the Sharks had a lengthy win streak end, which was their 7-game winning streak through most of January. They ended up losing 3 games in a row pretty badly, letting in 6 goals in each of those 3 games, so the Sharks will look to turn this loss from a big win streak around much faster than they did before. Class dismissed.